Okay, hello and good afternoon, members of the board and officers. My name is Jorge Luis Paniagua Valle. I am one of the co-executive directors of the Mayor's Fund to Advance New York City. This is a meeting of the Board of Directors. It is February 24th, 2022. In attendance, we have Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, Commissioners Don Pinnock, and Commissioner Gary Jenkins, as well as Matt Everett serving as our secretary to the board. Also on the line is our other co-executive director, Danielle Berreline. We also are joined by Leah Perstamo, counsel and director of programs for the Mayor's Fund, as well as Joe Price, the director of finance and operations. Hello, good afternoon. It's so nice to see new faces, but I feel the same sense of energy and vigor and commitment to serving New Yorkers. So I'm really excited to get this meeting started. We have a good agenda today with some important business. So what we'll do is we'll get right into it. If you have your agendas in front of you, Directors, you shall see that the first item is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. So please refer to your board materials to review the minutes for the last board meeting. Should be on page 1. Take a moment. If there are any comments or if there are any edits to be made, please let us know.
I move that we approve the minutes.
I second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Lovely, that motion carries. Thank you so much. The minutes from the previous meetings have been approved and adopted. Let's now move on to our resolutions for today. So directors, today we have 2 resolutions for your review and for your vote. I will read these out loud, but you can follow along by referring to in your board materials resolution 1. I believe it should be page page 3 or 4 of your materials. Let me read the first resolution. It reads as follows. Whereas there is currently a vacancy in the office of chair, and whereas section 2 of article 5 in the fund bylaws states that any vacancy occurring in any office may be filled at any ensuing meeting of the board of directors. Now therefore be it resolved that Sheena Wright, Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiative, is hereby elected to serve as the fund's chair and will hold the office until the election or appointment and qualification of her successor. Resolved that this instrument be filed with the minutes of the proceeding of the fund's board of directors. Are there any questions to that resolution? Hearing none, may I have a motion to move this resolution? To adopt, pardon me.
So
I
moved.
recommend adoption.
I hear that coming. I hear a motion from Don. May I have a second?
Second.
I hear the second from Commissioner Jenkins. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, the resolution carries. Congratulations, Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor Wright. You're now chair of the Mayor's Fund Board of Directors. I want to provide this opportunity for you to say any remarks to the directors and to the rest of the folks at this meeting.
Thank you so much. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to be of service in this way. The Mayor's Fund has done such great work, particularly during the pandemic, and really our co-executive directors should be commended, and all the people that work at the Mayor's Fund. So really appreciate that. I'm excited to join the commissioners in this endeavor as well. They will provide a lot of great insight and support for this new administration and its efforts as we engage a philanthropic community to get stuff done. So I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. We are excited and looking forward to working together. I also want to provide this opportunity at this time now, if the other directors would like to make any comments. I'll start Don Commissioner Pinnock, would you like to make any comments at this time?
Thank you. I just would like to echo our Chair's sentiments regarding the great work of the Mayor's Fund. You know, it is really an amazing opportunity for me as a native New Yorker, and I think for all of us to figure out new and innovative ways to contribute to the city that we love. And so I'm certainly honored to serve with Deputy Mayor Wright and with my colleague, Commissioner Jenkins, in this way to really further our goals in this city about having a safer, more prosperous, and just city for us all. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Jenkins, would you like to take a moment to say anything?
Yes, good afternoon. I just want to say I feel privileged and honored to serve on this board under the leadership of Deputy Mayor Wright and my colleague Commissioner Pinnock. Just want to make sure that I'm continuing to give and provide and be of service to New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Don, Gary. Thank you so much for that time. Again, as well, looking forward to working together. Really appreciative and privileged to have your expertise and your service here with us. Let us now move on to the second resolution on our agenda. Second resolution will create the Audit and Finance Committee. I will read the resolution now. Whereas pursuant to the New York State's Public Authorities Accountability Act of 2005, the fund is required to have a finance and audit committee to oversee the annual financial audit report and conduct an accounting of the firm's conduct of accounting firms performing the audits. And whereas pursuant to Section 1, Article 4 in the fund bylaws, the fund board of directors may form from among its member a committee each consisting of at least 3 directors, and each of which shall have the authority of the board of directors as provided and permitted within the bylaws. And whereas the fund currently has 0 directors serving on its audit and finance committee, now therefore it be resolved that Deputy Mayor Wright, Commissioners Don Pinnock, Commissioner Gary Jenkins are hereby appointed to serve on the Audit and Finance Committee. Resolved further that this instrument be filed with the minutes and the proceedings of the fund's board of directors. Are there any questions about this resolution? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The resolution carries. We have now formed an Audit and Finance Committee. Each of you are a member of that committee. Once the general meeting of the board of directors completes, we will immediately transition into the Audit and Finance Committee. Now that we've concluded our business with regards to resolutions, I have the pleasure and privilege to now turn the floor over to Danielle Bearline, my colleague and partner at the Mayor's Fund, for her report about the Mayor's Fund's activities. Danielle?
Thank you, JL. And it's been wonderful working with you. And welcome to our new chair, Deputy Mayor Wright, and to our new directors, Commissioner Jenkins and Commissioner Pinnock. I've had the pleasure of partnering with your agencies on many impactful programs, and I look forward to working with you to help improve the lives of New Yorkers. The needs of New Yorkers are vast, diverse, and as the past several years have shown, ever-changing. I am proud of the work of the Mayor's Fund and our small but mighty staff's ability to meet the changing needs of our city's residents. As you know, the Mayor's Fund builds public-private partnerships with city agencies, philanthropic funders, and community-based organizations to develop impactful programs and initiatives. It's my pleasure to give you an update on some of the key programs and initiatives we've supported over the past year and a half. As FY20 came to a close and throughout FY21, we shifted our work from COVID relief efforts to recovery. Our flagship recovery programs included funding cash assistance, food access, youth workforce, small businesses, and addressing other basic needs. Supporting New York's young people has been a pillar of the Mayor's Fund, and we were proud to continue this work last year by partnering with the City University of New York to launch an expansion of CUNY tutor corps. With the support of the Mayor's Office of Youth Employment and the Department of Youth and Community Development, this program employed more than 250 undergraduate students to tutor 7,500 high school students that have fallen academically behind due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We were also excited to provide cash funding for the Trust Youth Initiative to support direct cash transfers and participation incentives to young people experiencing homelessness. This is a multi-year pilot and evaluation program undertaken by Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. The City of New York and Up Together are partners, and the pilot will support young adults living in New York City. Access to food is an essential need throughout the pandemic, and it continues today. We provided microgrants through Building Healthy Communities. These community-led food projects in COVID's hardest hit neighborhoods, including distributing food to households in need, increasing healthy food access and food justice through education and advocacy, supporting access to locally grown produce through community gardens, and hosting cooking workshops. We also granted the Food Bank for New York City funds to bolster its partnership with CBOs to distribute over 150,000 pounds of food and fresh produce during the current calendar year. To support small businesses, the Mayor's Fund provided a second round of funding for their Restaurant Revitalization Program, a partnership with the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity and the Human Resources Administration. The program supports restaurants in areas hardest hit by COVID-19 that commit to paying a full minimum wage of $15 an hour plus tips over the next 5 years, promoting race and gender equity, and providing free meals to vulnerable community members. Commissioner Jenkins, you actually witnessed this program firsthand when you had lunch at one of the restaurants during the summer of 2022. In July, we celebrated our hometown heroes who were on the front lines of the pandemic with a ticker tape parade. From healthcare workers to educators to utility and transportation workers and so many more, the Mayor's Fund was honored to partner with our city agencies and raise the sponsorship dollars to pay for the parade. What a special day it was watching our hometown heroes march up the Canyon of Heroes on Broadway with confetti flowing everywhere and fellow New Yorkers cheering them on from the streets. I would also like to thank Commissioner Pinnock and our friends at DCAS who stepped up to help us get water and other supplies to parade participants and viewers along the parade route to keep them hydrated on that very, very hot July day. This past November, the Mayor's Fund achieved its 5-year goal of building 50 mini pitches and providing free soccer programming to thousands of young New Yorkers throughout the 5 boroughs through the New York City Soccer Initiative. On a beautiful sunny day, we held a ribbon cutting at the 50th mini pitch at PS 184 in Lower Manhattan. This initiative was a first of its kind partnership with the City of New York, NYC Football Club, the U.S. Soccer Foundation, Adidas, and Etihad Airways. But we're not finished yet. We announced along with our partners a commitment to build an additional 26 mini pitches leading up to the 2026 World Cup, which will be hosted across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And rounding out at the end of 2021, the Mayor's Fund Holiday Giving Program, we partnered with NYC Kids Rise to support NYC Baby Bonds Community Scholarships. Community scholarships enable local organizations, private individuals, foundations, and businesses to donate directly to students' educational savings, leveraging local assets to build financial wealth in and with communities that have faced systematic barriers to wealth building. I'm delighted to announce today that we will be providing NYC Kids Rise with a $50,000 grant for NYC Baby Bonds Community Scholarships. And most recently, in the hours after the January 9th tragic high-rise fire in the Bronx, the Mayor's Fund quickly launched the Bronx Fire Relief Fund to help the families and individuals affected. We've received thousands of grassroots donations from individuals and organizations from all 5 boroughs and across the country, as well as generous support from partners in the business and philanthropic community. To provide immediate relief, we worked with the city to distribute preloaded cash gift cards to affected families. We also partnered with Grammy winner and Bronx native Cardi B to pay for funeral expenses for the deceased. Having raised millions of dollars, we are currently working with various community-based organizations and city agencies to assess the needs of those impacted and determine how best to support them in the medium and long term with funds raised. We couldn't do this work without our partners, including the funding community, community-based organizations, city agencies, our board of directors, and especially you, our board of advisors, and especially you, our board of directors. Thank you for your guidance and support. We look forward to continuing the work to meet the needs of all New Yorkers. And I'd love to take any questions that you might have.
No questions, but just thanks again so much for the leadership and the hard work of the fund. Those are really impressive. I felt like I was there. So I really appreciate all the great work that you all have done in this past year and a half.
Thank you. It's been a lot of it was a lot of talking, but I really wanted to make sure that you got a good breadth of the work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danielle.
I'll pass it on back to you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Let us now open over. I'm going to ask if our new directors, now you're brand new, so you may not have any new business that you may want to bring up at this meeting. All right, hearing no new business. I'm sure in future meetings we'll have more, but brand new directors, no new business at the moment. Works out just fine. In that case, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask for a motion to close the meeting of the board of directors. We will immediately transition to the meeting of the audit and finance committee meeting. Our guest speakers for that are already in the lobby. They are auditors from RSM to provide the report on the financial audit. So that's just FYI. So may I have a motion to close the meeting of the board of directors, please?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay. And meeting then is adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. We're going to stay on here. I'm going to bring in our guests from RSM, and we will begin the meeting of the Audit and Finance Committee. Hello, Jen and Melissa. You are on live with the Board of Directors of the Mayor's Fund, as well as the newly formed Audit and Finance Committee of the Mayor's Fund. You have here the Chair, Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright. You also have Commissioners John Pinnock, Gary Jenkins, and our Secretary, Matt Everett. So the Deputy Mayor and the Commissioners, John and Gary, they are the directors of the Mayor's Fund. The board, there are members of the Mayor's Fund Board of Directors, and Matt, you know, is our secretary. I will open the meeting now of the Audit and Finance Committee. We have one agenda item, and that is the presentation from RSM. So welcome, Jen, welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for your help. I will provide the floor to you to begin.
Great, and nice to meet the new committee members. Thank you for having us at your, I assume, your first Audit and Finance Committee meeting. So just by way of introduction, for those who don't know me, I'm Jen Katz. I'm an audit partner at RSM. I've been working on the audit of the Mayor's Fund for several years now. And I'm joined today by Melissa Quinn. She's a senior manager at the firm. She also has been helping with the audit of the Mayor's Fund for several years now. So typically what we do in this meeting is we go through high level the financial statements. I believe you've seen them already in advance. So we'll just talk through some highlights. And then we go through the required communications, which includes the presentation of results of the audit and matters that we're required to discuss with you at the end of the audit. That being said, before I jump right into the financial statements, anything anyone wants to ask us ahead of time, just because it is our first time meeting with you?
Jen, just curious, how long have you all been the auditors for the fund?
So that's a great question. I joined RSM in 2013. I joined from a Big Four firm, and Mayor's Fund was a client already at that time. So it does precede my arrival to the firm, but I have been working on it since 2013 or 2014.
Great, thanks.
All right, Melissa, are you able to share your screen? If not, I can. You want to share the financial statements first?
Sure.
Thank you. I actually, JL, I have to see if we have the authority to do that too. We can check.
I think so. It seems like I should be able to.
Great. Yep, perfect. Oh, that's the report. Yeah, go to the financials.
Okay. There we go.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'll start with the opinion page. And what I just want to point out here is this is a draft of the opinion that we anticipate issuing. The plan is really to issue everything final tomorrow, after going through this formality of meeting with you today. And the only thing I want to point out is that this is a clean or an unmodified opinion. Back in the day, we would call it an unqualified opinion. So this is very standard language, and there is nothing in here that would say that there are any sort of material misstatements in the financial statements. So if you can keep going, Melissa, and stop on, I believe it's page 7 in the MD&A where we show comparative numbers. Right here, thank you. So the financial statements of the Mayor's Fund only show single year. So this is the management discussion and analysis, which really it's required by the GASB. It's a place for management just to describe a little more detail about the activity that's happened for the year at the fund. But the reason why I want to stop in the MD&A is because you get to see comparative information, and especially, being new in the role, just to get a sense of what changed year over year. So you'll see total assets of the fund at June 30, 2021 were about 28.5 million. And that is about a 17% decrease from last year, 34.3 million. Liabilities are slightly up, and you'll see the net position decreased from 27.4 million last year to 17.8 million this year. So I'll explain why that is if you scroll down to the next table, please, Melissa. All right, so this helps understand why there are those decreases. Last year, the fund had the COVID-19 relief fund. And due to that and everything going on in the world and obviously in New York, contributions and grants were significantly higher than they usually are. They were about 77.4 million last year. This year, there were about 17.8 million, and that's typically where the fund falls out with revenue. It's typically in that $15 to $20 million range. So last year really was the outlier. And then with all of the contributions and grants coming in last year, program services, so this is the direct program costs, were very high as well, 65.7 million, but still couldn't keep pace with just the huge influx of resources. So last year, there was an increase, a change in net position, or really your net income of 11.6 million. And this year, those funds continued to get used to be provided to support programs throughout New York City. And that's why this year there was a change in net position of a loss of 9.5 million. But essentially, I think the 2-year history there is important to understand that it took 2020 and 2021 to utilize a lot of the additional funds that were received. All right, so if you want to go now, Melissa, to the balance sheet. All right, so here's your statement of net position. It really is just a little bit more detail of the numbers we just talked about, but you'll see the composition of assets. It's primarily 9 million of cash and 17.7 million of investments. That 17.7 million of investments, it's all in one mutual fund. Accounts payable and accrued expenses, that's really just a product of timing of when payment is made on expenses that were incurred. And the bulk of that is a $7 million payable to a New York City department. You can go to the next page, please. All right, so this is just more detail now of the income statement. Are you able to make it a little bit smaller so maybe we could fit the whole? Great, thank you. So again, you'll just see it's a breakout of what we already discussed. 17.8 million of revenue, 28.2 million of operating expenses, primarily for program services. One minor change we're going to make to this, where it says investment loss, that's really a net of the unrealized gain or loss for the year and the realized gain or loss on the year for any sales activities. So we're just going to add the word net there. It'll say net investment loss. And non-operating revenue, a lot of it is the support received from the City of New York contract. They pay the mayor's fund on a quarterly basis in the amount of $700,000 for the whole year. If you can just go now to the statement of cash flows. I don't typically spend too much time on this. It's really just to get a sense of cash activity, since the financial statements are on the accrual basis, just to reconcile the change in cash year over year. The only thing I do want to point out, this draft that we provided to you, there's a slight change in the allocation of the proceeds from sale of investments and purchases of investments. Those numbers, the net of the two numbers will stay the same, but we're going to make a minor change to move some proceeds from sales into the purchases where it was picked up incorrectly from the trustee statement. But again, no changes to the overall numbers. So that's what I wanted to highlight for the financials. I will stop there in case there are any questions.
Could we go to the video? Could we bring down, thank you.
No questions from me. That was clear.
Thank you. I guess
for
hearing
me.
none, we'll also just go about, sorry, Dawn, were you going to ask a question?
No, I just said none from me. I didn't know if you needed to hear from each of us.
Right. It was very clear. Thank you for that.
Okay, great. Melissa, if you want to pull it back up, I just want to go now to the CFA. So we also perform a single audit. The mayor's fund expends more than $750,000 of federal funds in a year, which means you are required to have an audit performed under uniform guidance. So there's also a section in the financial statements that you are provided with that has our results of that testing. So here is the CFA. This shows 963,000 of expenditures. There was one small adjusting entry during the audit of about $4,000 that I think isn't reflected in here. So it really, it's going to be about 968,000. And this is all the AmeriCorps grant 94.006. The fund has been administering this program for many, many years. We perform tests of compliance and internal controls over compliance related to this program and did not have any reportable findings. So if you want to go, Melissa, to the schedule of findings and question costs, please. Thank you. So the schedule of findings and question costs, it breaks this out into two sections. One, the financial statements, and then two, federal awards. So as I just mentioned, we didn't have any reportable findings as it relates to the federal awards. We did have one material weakness as it relates to internal controls over financial reporting. Just for your benefit, being new in this role, this is not something new. It has been a recurring matter. And it's primarily due to two factors. One, the fund really is a nonprofit organization, but you follow governmental reporting, GASB reporting requirements. And there is a little bit of a disconnect in terms of some revenue and expense recognition that has always been a little bit of a difficult kind of bridge to gap. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that the mayor's fund is reimbursing other departments, other agencies for programs that they are carrying out. And sometimes the mayor's fund may not approve to actually support that program until 1 or 2 years after the program already incurred costs. So sometimes there's difficulty tracking when the actual expense was incurred and when it's getting reported in the financial statements, and just keeping good controls over making sure everything's captured in the correct year. So we have continued to see some adjusting entries that have been required just to make sure that revenue and expense is recognized in the correct year and not just on the cash basis of accounting. So any questions on that material weakness?
No.
So I will go to the communication letter now.
And so the communication letter is that new item that I believe I forwarded to everyone. So Jen, they have that in their records as well. So
Great. Great. So I won't touch on everything in here. Essentially, under the professional standards, there are certain things we are required to communicate to you. It's all here in writing for you to read through. So I really just want to touch on the highlights. The highlights being, if you want to just scroll down a little bit more, it's harder to fit in WebEx everything on one page. There were no new significant accounting policies that were adopted by the fund this year, so nothing that would have changed how things have been reported in the past. If you want to go to the next page. There were no disagreements with management or consultations with other accountants. No significant issues discussed with management. One thing during this audit, there had been some turnover at the funds, and just a little bit of a learning curve and trying to get on board with everything that had happened. The outgoing director of finance left the fund just before the fiscal year end. So of course, that's a really critical time for the fund, those weeks leading up to June, and then the whole month after June, just trying to close down the books and records. So there was turnover in that really critical period. It did cause difficulties, but nothing that we wrote in here is significant, just something I wanted to bring to your attention. In the past, we have been able to wrap up the audit earlier than February. If you want to go to the next page.
I do have a question there. What's the typical time frame for the audit process?
So typically we wrap up by the end of October. There were, aside from what I just mentioned with there being some turnover and some learning curves this year, there also was a delay this year by the OMB in releasing their compliance supplement. The compliance supplement is what we use to do the single audit. So we didn't have the federal guidance that we have to follow until much later. So we already knew we were going to be delayed for that. We just couldn't do the single audit until we had what we needed. So it was kind of the perfect storm of two things hitting at once and then being able to pick back up once we had everything we needed. So we do like to highlight estimates that are in the financial statements just so that you're aware. One is the valuation of investments. We do independently price test or value the investments. So based on work that we did, we concluded management's estimate was reasonable. There's also an allowance for doubtful accounts. The allowance itself was ultimately reasonable, but we did identify, and this is part of the comment written up in our overall material weakness, that there really didn't appear to be any sort of assessment of the allowance this year. It wasn't fully evaluated in terms of subsequent cash receipts, the historical policy. We felt likely the allowance may be higher than it needed to be just because there's been really strong history in recent years of collections of accounts receivable. There have been a couple write-offs, but overall, the estimate that's in there is not unreasonable, but we did encourage management to do a little bit of a harder look at the allowance next year and see if, they can fine tune that approach a little bit. And then the last estimate is the allocation of expenses between program and supporting. The Mayor's Fund does so much work that's directly related to its programs that this is not as complex for the funds. But there are certain costs, including salaries, that might be allocated between program or general and administrative. So we did look at management's calculation of that, and we concluded it was reasonable. We can go to the next page. So on the audit, we typically have two categories of journal entries that we present to the audit committee at the end of the day. One would be recorded audit adjustments. So these are items that were identified on the audit, we brought to management's attention, and they decided to record an adjusting entry for those items. So you will see a couple of material ones here that I'll speak to. The $925,000 one, this was a little bit of a unique situation where the funds had exhausted all of the funding that they received under, Gail, was it the Robin Hood grant? I believe it was a Robin Hood funding agreement for about 20 million.
So I believe you're referring to our one of the COVID programs.
Yes, the
Healthcare
healthcare
Heroes,
heroes.
yeah.
Yeah. So all 20 million had been expended, and then one of the vendors returned $925,000 to the fund. And the fund in turn reduced their expenses for that amount that was returned back to them. But after the amount was returned back, a couple of additional invoices came in from a PR firm who worked on the program, saying that there actually were still costs that needed to be covered. So this entry was to basically re-recognize the expense, to put it back into expenses and not recognize the amount of money given back to the fund. The next item here, 381,000, there had been a payable that existed last year. It was actually an expense that started to be incurred in fiscal year 20, and it had been reversed from the general ledger without actually making the payment. So it was reducing expenses, even though typically what happens is you record the payment that you made to expense, and then you reverse the prior year payable. So the net impact this year is 0. But there was no actual payment made, so expenses were being reduced, and it wasn't appropriate. So it had to be re-recorded, and then there were some additional costs to the same vendor that hadn't yet been accrued for, and they hadn't been paid yet. So that's the 381,000. A similar situation happened. I am skipping down to the $253,904 item. A similar situation happened on the accounts receivable side. This was revenue in fiscal year 20, and it was an accounts receivable in fiscal year 20. The payment did not come in fiscal year 21 to the fund, but the fund had reversed it out of its accounts receivable and had also lowered its revenue when it did that. But that shouldn't have been done until the payment came in. So this is just restoring the receivable and the revenue balance. So these, oh, yep. Oh, I thought I heard a question. So these items are primarily what went into the material weakness, because you'll see here, the impact on expenses was about 1.5 million, and the impact on revenue was about 700,000. And Melissa, if you want to go to the next page. All right, the second category of entries that we talk about are unrecorded or uncorrected misstatements. When we do the audit, we work with a materiality. You know, the opinion is that the financial statements are reasonably free of material misstatement. So there is a threshold in terms of management being able to make decisions of what is or is not material to the financial statements. And, you know, where in this situation, we agreed with management and didn't require them to book adjusting entries. But you will see here, when we were doing our expense testing, there were about, and apologies, I don't know why the font there isn't showing up, but that's about 144,676 of expenses that we found were recognized in 2021 that seemed to have a service period of 2020, so really should have been recorded last year. At the end of the day, net position, there's no impact because over the 2 years, it evens itself out. The 99,931 is just a projected number related to that. So when we do an audit, it's a sample basis. So then we project out our results over the rest of the population. So that 99,000 is just a judgmental. It's not a factual number that we found, but we're saying there could be additional errors based on what we saw. And then the only other item I'll point out in here, the 166,000. I had mentioned that we saw that it's likely the allowance is higher than it necessarily needed to be. So based on our calculation, our understanding of subsequent collections and the historical policy to be at about 5% of AR, we felt that the allowance could have been reduced about 166,000. So the net impact of all of these items on that position was about 115 or 116,000. So these are not reflected in the financials, but again, not considered material to the financials as a whole. And then if we keep going, so at the end of the audit, we asked management, or before I get to the rep letter, actually, we put this is just a recommendation. This isn't a control finding, but you know, the question was asked how long I've audited the mayor's fund, and I mentioned I've really been working with you guys since about 2013 or 2014. In that time, I actually am not sure how many executive directors there have been, how many directors of finance there have been, but it's been a lot. There's been a lot of turnover. And so we just put some kind of boilerplate recommendations in here, just how to help develop a good succession plan so that you don't continue to have that learning curve to overcome when there are new people. There's a lot going on at the fund. It's a really complex organization. Even with only, you know, 17 million of revenue this year, there's a lot of moving parts. And the material weakness is largely due to just turnover and not having enough people given all of the high volume of activity. So we put this in here just for you to consider. It would be nice to see a little bit more support on the accounting side of the fund, and to just know that there's a little bit more of a concrete succession plan in place so that you don't continue to experience this turnover. And the next item here is a rep letter. So we always share this with the committee members. This is the last step. If the audit committee approves the financial statements, then we ask management to sign the rep letter they provided to us. These representations that are in here, a lot of them are very standard based on professional guidance. No major changes from what we have asked management to rep to in the past. So that concludes our required communications. I know you have the whole packet, so we'll let you look through it as Melissa just scrolls to let you see that all. And I'll turn it back over if there's any more questions.
Thank you.
Any questions from our directors?
No, this was very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to read the material more in depth, but I appreciate the overview.
Thank you for your presentation.
And really appreciate your recommendations just about stability and succession and that as well.
Jen, Melissa, thank you so much. I want to just say a few words here that, as Jen mentioned, you know, we did have some turnover, some key turnover this past year, but I believe that with the team we have in place, as complex as the work is of the Mayor's Fund, team here did work hard, did meet the challenges, came and tried to answer every question, pull out every document, really dive into the nitty gritty. I want to especially thank our new director of finance and operation who joined after the audit had begun, Joe Price, who jumped right into it as well, and really helped the fund get through this particular audit. And I'm very appreciative of Joe, your help, and the help of everyone else at the team. Jen, Melissa, thank you so much for the presentation. Mayor's Fund is always happy to have these presentations out like this. Your recommendations are those that we hear going to consider. And we've also, some of these have thought about ourselves as we have experienced some of this turnover. And we always are thinking about, with each new turnover, what ways in which we can improve that knowledge transfer to ensure the stability and the consistency of excellence that we've all come to expect from the Mayor's Fund. So truly appreciate your suggestions and help there. It sounds like there aren't any more specific questions regarding the audited financial statements. So may I have a motion to approve these, the FY22 audited financial statements?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Thank you so much. I hear that second. All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
All right. All those in favor outnumber those opposed, so that means this motion carries.
And
Uh,
JL, I just have one more formality, if it's okay, now that you've done the motion to approve. We also just have to take this time to update if there are any subsequent events since June 30, 2021, and or any fraudulent matters or allegations of fraud, since we've last checked in with you that you would just want to bring to our attention now.
I don't have any.
Neither do I.
No, I don't.
Thank you.
Folks, before we end, I will make a correction. I think I said FY22. Can the record show I meant to say FY21 audited financial statements? I misspoke there. I apologize for that. That the board has approved the audited financial statements that end in fiscal year 2021. Apologies for that.
Great. One last thing, one question, the Form 990, I guess that's up next.
Yes, so we approach this by line of business. So Melissa and I work on the audit, and then Lynn Johnson is the tax partner who works on the 990. So she, I believe, has, I don't know if it's a separate meeting or if that, typically is handled without an actual audit committee meeting, but that's not on for today, I believe.
Okay, great.
I know they're working on it because I have seen the tax team in our file.
Yes,
Part of this is they were waiting for our
the
financial
audit.
issued. They've been bugging me for quite a while to ask me when it's going to be issued.
Oh, done, check.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions for RSM?
No.
No.
Thank you. May I have a motion to close this meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
very
so
much.
much.
Right.